Welcome to SolFul Connections, where we skip the small talk and head right into the soul talk. I'm Amanda Solar, and each week we share the kinds of stories that remind us we're not alone. It's about being human, raw and unfiltered, just real talk. Let's connect.
Connection.
So today I have with me Craig Pelkey-Landes, who is a writer. Um, he has an entity which I would like to know more about called Words Beyond Content. Is that right, Craig?
Yeah. Yep.
And wrote a book, White Nonsense.
Yeah, A Brief History of White Nonsense.
Love it. So much to get into. But first and foremost, thank you so much for being here.
Well, thanks for the invitation. Appreciate it.
So before we dive in, I've just been asking this question. What recently has really made you smile? Just something that's happened either today, yesterday, last week, whenever, that's just brought a smile to your face.
Let's see. Well, a bunch of stuff, really. Well, so just this past year, my wife and I have schedules that sync up. So we're both have weekends for the first time in I can't even remember. So we just laughed a lot this weekend. We've had these 2 days together the past 6 months or so, and it's been fantastic. And yeah, it's fun to just laugh together. We just like making sly comments to each other or just noticing something and laughing about it. So yeah, just we had some good laughs this weekend.
Well, I'll tell you, I think laughter is really undervalued. Like, I think we like it when we do it, but I think it's almost medicinal, honestly.
Mhm.
And, the world is heavy. And maybe it's always been, but it feels particularly heavy right now. So if you can find light, and nothing does that better than laughter, I
Mhm.
think that's
Mhm.
awesome.
Yeah, and I think finding laughter with somebody like, I enjoy watching comedy clips on YouTube. I was just watching the Michelle and her brother Craig have
Oh,
a
yeah.
podcast, and they were with Keenan Thompson and they were doing a round of Black Jeopardy, and that was really, really
I
funny.
saw it. I forwarded it. I thought it was so funny
Oh my
as
gosh. But just so there's that kind of laughter, but then there like, yeah, laughter with a spouse, laughter with your kids, laughter with a friend, like in real life, in person. There's something qualitatively different about that kind of laughter.
I agree. And I'm Irish, and I always thought this was an Irish thing. I don't know but we laugh like at funerals. Like I think we as the people always expect the worst. There's always a bit of melancholy. So when we're at a funeral, we're like, well, it happened, we're here.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
it's just the most convivial, like maybe post funeral service. There's a lot of laughter there. And I I feel like that, we celebrate the person with laughter, and we
Mhm,
celebrate
mhm.
one another with laughter. I think it's so important. I do.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Well, the one thing I didn't mention, I'm sure that there's a host of things I didn't mention, but you also have the Yell Fire podcast. Is that
Yes.
right?
Yep. That's right. Yeah, I started that 3 or 4 months ago. Yeah, the title "Yell Fire" is from a song by Michael Franti, and what I take it to be about is like when when the house is on fire, it's time to yell fire. When people are asleep, it's time to yell fire, and the lyrics kind of go along those lines. So yeah, the subtitle is "Conversations to Combat the Lie of White Supremacy." So yeah, that's kind of the gist of what it's.
Okay, this is so interesting. So, for those who aren't watching and they're only listening to us, you are white, right?
Yes.
And I only note that because it's I love that you're devoting so much of your time and your efforts and your skills to this, you know, platform, to this platform.
Mhm.
Can you kind of share, um, when did that start? Did that start like, was that like you as a boy doing that and being concerned about this? Like, what, how did we get here?
Um, yeah, I've tried to reflect on that over the last few years, and and looking back, I can see kind of some signposts from when I was a kid, like when the Scholastic Book Fair would come around, like I collected books. Like I had a autobiography of Frederick Douglass, Harriet Tubman,
Yeah.
George Washington Carver. So there was that. And I remember kind of noticing, like I grew up in Phoenix, Arizona, which was in a super white neighborhood. And so there was always the one black kid in the class or the one Asian American kid or whatever. Um, and I would notice the racist joking and at people's expense. So I noticed that kind of thing when I was older. I got involved in an anti-racism training program in the early 2000s. So I did some of that, and I've done kind of some anti-racism training over the years, just to kind of keep my awareness heightened about my privilege and yeah, the fact that for I think this was truer maybe 20 years ago, 15 years ago. In some of my training, we talked about how being white meant not having to think about it. And that's still kind of true, but I think, in the Trump era, we are hitting that backlash where white people are aware of, and a segment of people don't want to call it privilege. They don't want to acknowledge it. Yeah.
Well, yeah, I think that sometimes people think that when you say the term white privilege, I think they think that people are saying they have no problems. Life is
Yeah,
easy.
exactly.
And that is not what white privilege is. But I do think that that sometimes is someone's perception. Like I work and I do this and and they they don't understand that just by virtue of being white,
Hmm.
that they can walk in a store and maybe not even be looked at twice. And
Right.
nobody's maybe going to follow them around, and
Hmm.
like there are small things and there are much larger things that maybe you're not even aware of.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Like I have two daughters. I didn't have to have the kind of conversation about interacting with the police that
Mhm.
a black parent or a parent of another ethnicity might have about, like what the presumptions might be about my kids or somebody else's kids interacting with the police.
So
Yeah.
I want to just delve just a little bit more because it is always fascinating to me. And I can relate because I do remember, when I was growing up, first of all, I always had a curiosity because I grew up in a predominantly white, not only white, but Catholic because I went to
Mm,
Catholic school. So it was like a
okay.
white Catholic people is who I was surrounded by. So I was always curious, first and foremost, about other cultures, other religions, other
Hmm.
ethnicities, like everything. But your curiosity branched into work, you know, and it
Hmm.
branched into taking action. And I'm wondering, is that a sense of justice? Is that a sense of service? Like, what's the root of that, do you think?
Well, I think part of it is just the realization that I have. So I chose a number of years ago to start my own business. And, business coaches and people like that will tell you to find your niche and to,
Mhm.
niche down and also to be clear about who is not your ideal client, who you don't want to work with. So a number of years ago, I decided to kind of be blunt and open about, my anti-racism, my thoughts about that kind of thing, because I'll attract the people who aren't freaked out by that, and people who don't like that, they'll find somebody else to to work with.
Right.
So yeah, part of yeah, I remember. I mean, I remember being kind of making that a conscious decision because in the when I first started Words Beyond Content, it started out as a content marketing, writing business, blog posts and stuff like that, and I needed work, so
Yeah.
so I was I was more careful about what I posted on LinkedIn, and
Oh,
I
right.
wasn't super careful about other places, but like, businessy, social media and stuff. I tried to not be too out there. But then, yeah, there was a point at which I thought, no, well, as the country kind of kept veering, veering,
Right.
not just to the, like, I'm happy to have conversations with people whose politics are different than mine, in terms of, economics and stuff like that. But, MAGA authoritarianism is a different thing. So yeah, I just decided to be more kind of out front. Well, and I saw how, a lot, I have white friends who say, I'm apolitical. I don't like
Mm.
politics. And actually, I, I want to be in a country where people can, you know, blissfully ignore politics. And,
Right.
they might, grumble about, who's in the White House, but things will basically just kind of,
Right.
chug along, be the same. For a long time, well, especially for white people, for a long time, white people didn't have to think too much about politics because it was just,
Was going to say when you said that, to say that I want to be apolitical is kind of like the height of white privilege.
yeah, yeah. Yeah,
Yeah, like
sure.
it doesn't
For
matter to me.
sure.
I'm gonna be
Yeah,
good either
yeah.
way.
Yeah. Well, and I think about that a lot. Like, I think now I'm talking about this stuff, and black women have been on the right side of history for forever, and fighting this fight, and like, here I am, uh Johnny come lately kind of. And so I try to be super aware of, I'm not trying to white splain racism to anybody. And I'm not even like, I don't call myself an ally. If somebody wants to identify me as an ally, that's fine. But yeah, I'm just trying to, as they say, do the work and try to be part of the solution more often than part of the problem.
Yeah. And so when did you write your book and what drove that and what is it about and who should read it?
Sure. So I think A Brief History of White Nonsense started to come out, when those of us who were surprised when Trump won in 2016. I think that was kind of where the germ of the idea came, because I was like, wow, people don't understand systemic racism, and they're like,
Yeah.
so after, like, I took a lot of years to, there's a lot of 500-page books about racism, about systemic racism, and they're excellent books. But I knew I'm super interested, and it took me ages to slog through these books.
Mhm.
So I wanted to do like a 100-page book about, the roots of white supremacy in the United States, which I trace back to the doctrine of discovery. It started out as the religious kind of rationalization for colonialism. So in the early to late 1400s, one of the popes said, "Hey, yeah, you can go into these lands and you can Christianize these people, and the land, and you're Christianizing, savages, or I forget
Yeah.
the exact language, but there was a couple of papal bulls that we now think of as the doctrine of discovery. Which, so if you are a European discovering land
Mhm.
that it happens that other people live there, who's discovering what? But so there was this kind of hierarchy that started with that, like we're civilized, you're uncivilized.
Right.
And then kind of the awareness and the definition of whiteness started,
Hmm.
after, in the centuries after that. And that eventually turned into a racial hierarchy that's totally made up, with whiteness as the most virtuous. So, and that turned into the, quote unquote normal. So you've had skin toned band-aids when we were growing up, and skin, like flesh toned crayons was, some kind of peach color.
Right.
So, so I try to, I call them through line. The chapters are through lines. So I try to trace
Mhm.
through lines in the book that show, and it's again, it's a brief, it's 100 pages. So it's not every example of this, but
Sure.
I chose examples of how the doctrine of discovery plays out today. And I'm involved in a group called the Coalition to Dismantle the Doctrine of Discovery, which, you know, give back land to indigenous people, remind everyone that indigenous people are still here. And the eradication program did not work. The cultural eradication program did not work. So I didn't try to look at every ethnic group. So I focus on white European Americans, Black Americans, and indigenous people. So I kind of trace those three groups and look at systemic racism through those, through the
Sense.
experiences of those.
So, Craig, I'm curious because, you talked about being vocal and you talked about originally, being cautious in social media. Because, this was a topic that gets under people's skin, the same
Yeah.
skin we're talking about, you
Yeah, yeah.
know, and I guess people want to do what they want to do with impunity,
Sure.
and people want to retain power.
Mhm.
And there are certain I don't think anybody, most people, I won't say not anybody, but a lot of people don't want to be called a racist, no
Sure.
matter how racist they are. So, how do you have the courage that it takes to say, what you want to say about this?
Well, I mean, well, I don't know what it has cost me in lost revenue. Perhaps,
Yeah.
there's probably people who don't want to work with me because I'm vocal. But I have some strong relationships with clients who work with me because I am vocal. But I I hate to say it out loud, but it hasn't cost me a whole lot. When I compare it to, a friend of mine does, a newsletter, and specifically anti-racism newsletter. She's a Black woman who has Barbados and English background, so she grew up in England and Barbados. So, and she gets harassed. She gets, online harassment
Wow.
all the time. And I mean, I've had, one or a handful of comments of, like, shut up and or whatever, Um,
Yeah.
but I don't get the kind of vitriol that other people get for when they're just trying to live their damn life.
Right. I mean, that's really good to hear because, no matter how much vitriol you or I or somebody else might face, you're still less vulnerable in the world right now than just so many
Mhm.
people who have no choice but to
Yeah.
be who they are in the world,
Right.
but that doesn't stop people from shirking and shying away from these hard discussions. So
Yeah.
I
Sure.
give you credit for doing it. So, do you have anything that you do just regularly or daily or rituals to just keep you centered and keep you grounded? Is there anything that you do, like I have to do this every day.
Yeah. Um, there's things I try to do every day that I try to remind myself to do every day. One of the things we have, like, so I live in New Mexico. For our listening audience, I grew up in Phoenix, but spent about 25 years in Pennsylvania, close to where Amanda is from.
Mhm.
I'm very familiar with that area. Now I live in New Mexico, and we have these the Manzano Mountains are behind us and have this really great view. So I try in the mornings to watch the sun rise over the mountains, which is really cool, and then take my coffee out to the back porch, have a little moment of gratitude. So I try to do that in the morning or at some point during the day. Sometimes it's with a glass of wine in the evening. Just sit out and just have a moment of gratitude. And I have a yoga routine that I do not often enough. But the gratitude thing is pretty regular, and I try to do the yoga. I try to do that daily, but it's not always.
I hear you. I'm the same. And actually, I will say my first yoga book was bought at one of those scholastic
Oh,
uh,
fun.
book fairs that you're talking about at St. Jude's, no less, when I
Oh,
was in
right.
fifth grade. Yeah, that was my
Wow. Wow.
introduction.
Wow.
I don't
Wow.
know how
Oh,
it
cool.
landed its way in there, but
Yeah.
so speaking of books, is there like a book or a movie or a quote that you really found compelling or has inspired you?
So I'm part of this group that did intention setting this summer, which I had never really done before. But it was like the 9 sessions of this, and something that kept coming up was Miss Honeychurch from A Room with a View. I don't know if you remember.
Oh, okay, I saw the movie 1,000 years ago. Whenever it came
Yeah,
out,
yeah.
I saw
A
it,
Room with a
so I
View.
don't fully remember it.
So Lucy Honeychurch is this stuffy upper class Victorian England woman who's young woman, and she's battling between this boring future with this guy named Cecil, who's just a very nice but boring guy that doesn't seem to have a whole lot of respect for Lucy. And then she's in Italy on this trip with her stuffy aunt, played by Maggie Smith, which is awesome. But anyway, so uh, Lucy is back home and she's playing piano, and the local pastor is the reverend is at the Honeychurch home, and she's playing with a lot of passion, and she doesn't live with that same kind of vim and vigor and
Mhm.
passion. And so the vicar, he says, boy, if Miss Honeychurch ever endeavors to live as she plays, we'll all be in for a treat, something along those lines.
I love that.
So yeah, well, I've been really trying to take that to heart, because I've been thinking a lot about how um, I I have a certain boldness in my writing, especially when I'm writing. Like the book is a little sweary and a little in your face, because I wanted to write it in my own voice. I'm a ghostwriter, so I write in other people's voices
Yeah.
for a living. So I want to write this book in my kind of unvarnished voice, and so I cuss and I make wisecrack remarks throughout the book, and so I want to live like I write. I want to I
Yeah.
want to be a little bolder especially in my business, in shining a light on my expertise. I was raised Mennonite. We're very cautious about tooting our own horn.
Mhm. No, I get that. Every Sunday, Catholics say, Lord, I am not worthy. Like
Oh,
that
yeah, yeah.
sentence is something we say every single Sunday. So
Yeah,
these
yeah.
are practices that when you're raised as a
Yeah.
child,
Yeah,
they become ingrained.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. It's the work of our life to kind of undo them.
Yeah, yeah. So I'm trying, like, just got in touch this summer with how I need to kind of undo some of that. And yeah, be more bold about my expertise, and not soft pedal it, but
Yeah.
yeah. Hey.
Don't shine your light under a bushel,
That's
just
right.
to quote the Bible.
That's right.
Um, but yeah, I relate to that. And I even relate to the writing because I spent many, many years writing scripts for people to
Oh,
say.
cool.
And so I can quickly figure out their voice and I can write in their voice.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
so it is funny when I write, I'm really insistent that it be in my own voice. And,
Yeah.
you know, I don't feel a sense of like, I'm going to write in my own voice. I just feel like, oh, this is my time to write my
Yeah,
voice.
yeah,
You know,
exactly. Yeah, yeah.
it's almost like, I think that there's almost like a disassociation when you're used to writing for someone else. Now you're writing for yourself. And that same approach becomes your approach for yourself, if that makes
Mm.
any sense. So, how would your loved ones, the people closest to you, describe you?
Huh. Um, that's a great question. I think my kids would describe me as a funny, quirky guy who they're kind of proud of for this book and my
Yeah.
work. They've said that kind of thing. Um, my wife similarly would describe me, I think, as a funny, quirky guy with a big heart. Um, yeah,
Is there anything you think that people get wrong about you? Maybe not your closest people, but people that are just meeting you or talking with you.
yeah, yeah. I can be like in a big group, I can be reserved at first, and so people might be surprised that, well, even in this, I haven't been super funny in this conversation. So,
Well, I mean, it's hard to like joke about white privilege. That's been a
yeah,
lot of
right.
our conversation. So what, you sound like you're living a beautiful life there in New Mexico. If you could just create like an alternative life, what would it be?
Hmm. Let's see. Well, this like without knowing a whole lot about Spain, I have a couple of acquaintances who either a long time ago or recently moved to Spain, and that seems like Barcelona specifically. That sounds spectacular. To I know they don't like tourists in Barcelona, but if you live there, and not be
Yeah.
a tourist. Yeah, that sounds pretty cool. Yeah, living in Spain. Yeah, just well, and I think about this. I think I often think just given my concerns about the country, about the trajectory of
Hmm.
the lie of white supremacy. Should I be an expat or should I stick it out? And I think
Yeah.
about there's and I think about people who whose lived experiences are directly impacted by the lie of white supremacy. I think of like two people I think about are James Baldwin and John Lewis. James Baldwin said, "Nope, I'm off to Paris." And I get that is valid. I understand that,
Yeah.
and uh, John Lewis got beat up on the Edmund Pettus Bridge
Hmm.
and said, "I'm I'm here. I'm gonna make this a more perfect union. Do whatever I can." And so, at the moment, I'm choosing that. Not that I'm John Lewis or I'm
No, I hear you. You're
that I
choosing
want
that.
to get beat up,
Yeah, right.
but
That
but
part of the journey.
yeah. And I know some people. I have some black friends who have left and said nope, nope, nope,
Yeah.
nope.
Yeah.
Um, so so I get that, and
Yeah.
that's absolutely valid. But yeah, for at the moment, you know, it sure sometimes feels like Germany in the 1930s, like we have some decisions to make about who we are, individual. Like you, when you think about that, why didn't that Jewish family that could have left in 32 or whatever? Why didn't they?
Yes.
And we all make choices.
Yeah. And they probably had hope too, you think about it.
Yeah, you think
It
like,
is
how bad could this get? This is
right.
crazy.
And every
This
time
is
we think that, Craig, we
yeah,
wake up and we turn on the news.
yeah. Wow.
Yeah. Yeah. That's really interesting. Speaking of James Baldwin, he could have written so much of what he has said today. So, what from your work the work that you're doing, the book, the
Mhm.
podcast, do you really hope sticks with people? That's the takeaway.
Well, I think the takeaway for me, and what I hope the takeaway is for people who read the book or listen to the podcast, is that white supremacy is pernicious, but it is dying. It would be nice to think that this is kind of its death rattle, this like last
Hmm.
fight for acceptance and power. Is I'm not optimistic enough to think that that is exactly the case, but I do think the arc of history does bend toward justice, but you know, history is really dang long. so
It
so
is.
when you're in it, when you're in these your little tiny sliver of history, it probably doesn't feel like it's bending at all. But uh but yeah, I hope the book and the podcast give people courage to keep to keep fighting, to keep living so that everybody can someday just live their life and not have to worry about watching their backs, having conversations with their kids about interacting with this group or that group. Yeah, I hope, yeah, I would like the book and the podcast to give people a little sliver of hope, and maybe some action along with it. My guests often, have a particular thing that they're doing in DEI or in education or whatever it is. So yeah, there's action to take and steps to take along the way.
Yeah, that's a beautiful aspiration. Well, thank you, Craig. Thank you for coming on. I really appreciate it.
Yeah,
I will
thank
make
Amanda.
sure to put a link to the book and your
Okay,
podcast in the show notes
sure,
so that people can
sure.
find you.
Great conversation, Amanda. Appreciate it. Thanks.
Hey, thanks so much for listening. Thank you for being a valued part of the Soulful community. Thank you to William Aronson for writing, recording, and producing the Soulful Connections theme song. And finally, always know you're not alone. We are connected. We're all in this thing together, and you and your story are important. Let's just keep on connecting.